that we can start the second session of the Time Use Week. I'd be grateful if you could just return to your seats, and that way we can start our session. So please, everybody, sit down. That way it'll be much more comfortable and more straightforward and more streamlined. We're right on time. We're doing very well for time, but we don't want to lag behind. So we will now begin the second meeting of the Catalan Network for the Right to Time, which was set up in order to bring together all Catalan organizations that have to do with time use. The purpose of the network is to create and disseminate knowledge on this matter. The network works towards healthier uses of time that also deploy more solidarity and are more sustainable. Only thus can we work towards transition, a more environmental, feminist, green transition in our country. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Saray Espejo Bonito, Director General for Care, Time Organization and Work Equity in the Government of Catalonia. You have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you. I haven't been mic'd up because I'll just speak for a couple of minutes. My name is Saray Espejo. I'd like to greet and welcome everyone, the authorities at every level, civil society, companies. I'd like to welcome you all, and we hope this week will be a rewarding one for us all. Most of you don't know me because I only took this post a month ago. I'm a Director General in the Government of Catalonia, and I will be in charge, amongst other things, of use of time. I'm very pleased that you contacted me and my department to implement this international initiative that makes Barcelona, as it were, the center of the time use world this week. We all have an issue, very poor time management. I'm one of them. I'm one person involved. I didn't have the time to even print out the program or my speech because I only arrived from a trip yesterday evening. We're all embarked in this issue of work-life balance. We all need to live. Life cannot possibly just be about work. As you know, this is the second meeting of the network. Most of you have probably met in person. I haven't had a chance to greet everyone, so please do not hesitate to come over and introduce yourselves. The network was set up in 2022 in order to link up all organizations in Catalonia that have to do with time use. However, as you know, in the case of the Government of Catalonia, our department is part of the our section is part of the Department for Equality and Feminisms. So we look at time use from a feminist perspective. As you know, women are the most time poor because they invest much more time than men do in unremunerated tasks, including caregiving. And that's why our department is really paying attention to co-education on this matter during the current legislature, because we feel it's very important to start with the children. It is in childhood that we start promoting unequal distributions of time use, and so we hope we all agree on this renewed perspective, tackling the matter from a co-educational perspective. We have over 300 members, actually 304. That includes private bodies, research groups, local authorities. I see someone here from my university, business organizations, you name it. There's something that we can all be very proud of. There's quite a good balance here between the public sector and the private sector. As we all know, it is only by working hand in hand that we can move forward in better uses of time. And so we're very proud to state that this network is quite balanced in its distribution. What our network offers is facilitation for sharing experience within Catalonia, in some cases even outside of Catalonia, providing material, resources, and information. In the working plan for 2024, we've had meetings of the promoter group. We've taken part in symposia also outside of the Time Use Week. We have implemented something we're very proud of that we believe we can work on further in the future, the network of equality professionals. The government of Catalonia, particularly our department, wants to work hand in hand with local government. We know that citizens first address their local government, so it's very important for us to help local governments in their public policies, including time use policies. As you know, our Directorate General in the government of Catalonia can provide lots of resources and material that we've put together in order to help you all improve your time management and time use. This afternoon, some of you will be taking part in the plenary meeting of the time policies and time use group. So at that point, we will have the opportunity to hear from everybody. We hope to hear, especially from those of you whose ears are closest to the ground, to see what is working best, what can be best shared with other authorities, so we can try and expand the network as much as possible in the context of identifying best practices and best policies. The government of Catalonia believes that it's really important to have time use policies or public policies that are truly helpful for citizens and that are feminist, because that is the approach we take in the government of Catalonia. Without further ado, I'd like to recommend that everyone pays attention to the speakers speaking from a public authority perspective, including and also speakers from SECOT, because they're the ones who are actually implementing everything we're discussing here today. I hope we can all work together to rationalize our use of time as much as possible so that we all operate in the sphere of equality and liberty. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Espejo. As you have heard, a lot is being done already in order to improve our time use, in order to get rid of this feeling that we're not dealing with life properly. The time has come now to hear about good practices that have been developed to rationalize uses of time. Many organizations, many bodies have adhered to the Catalan network for the right to time. And this is being done on a public basis, on a private basis, and also within the third sector, as it is called. But I won't speak about this. I will be asking people to take the floor up here. So, Ms. Cristina Vargas Soria, 6th Deputy Mayor for Internal Services, Participation Policies, Equality and Commerce of Santa Coloma de Gramenet City Council. Please step up here. Thank you very much and welcome. We will also hear about good practices from Núria Ferrer y Cardona, Councillor for Social Rights, Citizenship and Health of the Amposta City Council. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. We will also hear from Pere Ejarque Guillamat, Head of Career Guidance and Job Placement at SECOT. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. And to close the circle from the third sector, we will hear from Julia Vigo, Head of Equality and Feminisms at the third social sector panel, as well as Marta Campo, Head of Strengthening Policies at the same panel or board. So we will hear from them. They are the ones who have the floor now to tell us about their good practices. Without further ado, I give the floor to Ms. Vargas Soria of Santa Coloma de Gramenet City Council, who will tell us about the SIVA monitoring service. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everybody, and I'd like to thank the organization for inviting us to tell you about our project. I would like to set the context. Our town council promotes public feminist policies from CIBA, CIBA, which is a pioneering center that was set up to tackle all of our challenges in terms of feminism and equality. Aren't my slides being shown here? I was hoping to have my slides shown. Let's see. Here we have it. There. Yeah, so I was setting the context about CIBA, C-I-B-A. So, our city council set up this pioneering center with different strategic lines, including a space for participation, a space for families, co-education and co-responsibility, where the babysitting service is included. That's what I called the interpreter called the monitoring service earlier. It's babysitting. So we also have genealogy and historic memory, and also a space for tackling sexist violence. So what led us to set up the babysitting service? Well, the fact that women are still the ones mainly in charge of caregiving. And so we thought we would change our public policy paradigm, placing life and caregiving at the center. We also wanted to promote innovative approaches to make life more equal, and also to give social value to the care, the work of reproduction. And that is why Time for Care was set up. Temps per cures, Time for Care. As a result of all of this being brought together, in March of 2023, we set up Menu da SIVA, which is the name of our, for now, one-off babysitting service. It's for children aged 0 to 16. This is a one-off care service. On the one hand, it's about providing caregiving for the general population on a one-off basis, so that family members can take time off their caregiving responsibilities to train or access other options. It's offered from 9 to 1 and from 4 to 8 p.m. It's caregiving or supervision of children aged 0 to 16. 16 is not that much of a baby anymore. But anyway, we have an admin worker, we have a coordinator, and we have caregivers. But in addition to their work, it's also very important to have a co-educational approach there.
So we offer after-school activities and combine it with other activities too, because we think that co-education for us is a key pillar in order to achieve a fairer and more equitable society. So we work with families, mothers, fathers, and the children themselves in order to, via games, music, theatre, and so on, we try to work on co-responsibility of caring. So it's not always women that have to do it. And we also try to work on preventing gender violence and social and affectionate relationships. So I'll give you some figures here to see how our service has evolved in our city, Santa Coloma de Gramenet. It's been very successful, I think. We started in March 2023, and we offered services to just over 200 families. And now we are reaching 500. So for us, it's a consolidated project. It's been very well assessed and valued by our citizens. We have freed up about 6,600 hours of families that were dedicated to care, so they can spend that time on other things. And now we see what they spend that time on. But on the age front, between 0 and 3 years, there's a lack of places in creche in the municipality, so we offer that service. And also there's a need for covering the after-school time slots. So this is a service that we offer our families. We take into account the profiles of the families, and normally the ones that come in to ask for resources are usually women that come to us. And that means that we still see an unequal distribution of the caregiving activities. So there's still a lot of prejudice, and there's things that cannot just be solved by offering babysitting to their children. And then very often we also find cases of women that have no support networks, single parent families, usually single mothers, and with financial difficulties. So once again, both time and financial poverty affects women in an exaggerated manner. That's what we have to try to avoid. And what do the people who free up their time dedicate this new time? Well, they usually work more. So we are offering women more hours to be able to take up more working hours, which is one of the strategies that we're working on. So everything has to do with a feminist economy. And we also carry out different actions in CIVA. And very often women say they can't participate in these activities because they don't have time, but we free up time so they can do that. And also so they can participate in other services. So to conclude, for us, the babysitting service has been really successful, but it has to come together with this co-educational perspective, working with families, because there's still many challenges. And taking care of others should not continue with a female face, but it should be the face of both men and women. So now let's take a look at another example. Now we're going to hear from Nuria Ferrer Cardona from the City Council of Amposta. She is responsible for social rights, citizenship, and health. Thank you very much. When I was asked to present here an example of good practices or good best practices, I had my doubts because it's quite a matter of common sense that we should have timetables that are good for everybody. But obviously that's not the situation. That's why I accepted to participate in this roundtable. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm from Amposta. I suppose everyone knows where Amposta is. But if you don't know Amposta, it's a town rather than a city, but sometimes we do have a kind of small village mentality sometimes. 23,000 inhabitants. Before, Sarai said that we all suffer from time issues, and I'd just like to stress that today for me to get here has been extremely difficult. So whenever we plan conferences, it's really hard to get here by 9 o'clock in the morning. Although I left at 6 this morning, I was not able to get here before 10 o'clock. So we really need to be able to change working hours and hours for conferences and other events. Thank you very much. But having said that, I really had to say it because it's really been a torture trying to get here. Well, we in our citizenship and social rights department, which includes social services and other services, we were offering services within a more limited time scheme, but we were asked to offer from 8 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon, which is, of course, quite a lot of hours, but that allows people who had to work were able to adjust their hours. And our staff would not just work the typical official timetables from 8 to 3, but offer a wider range of hours in which they could offer services to citizens. Now, with this change in our timetables, what we did was we allowed for an entry during the mornings at different times, so we can offer citizens their services throughout all these hours, but people turn up to work adjusting to the common sense, the needs of the service and other workers. So people can start in the morning at different times. There's more time flexibility. People can adapt the timetables to what works best for them, and it also allows them to achieve a better work-life balance. Another thing that we started doing since COVID is teleworking. So one morning a week, all of those who work in our department during the week spend one morning doing teleworking, focusing on the more administrative aspects of our work. And then when they are in our services and the SIAP or other services to offer, what they do is they directly work with people there, answering their questions, so on, both in the mornings and in the afternoons. In Amposta, very often people work from 9 to 1, and then there's a break until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is terrible, and then we work till 7:30 or 8. That's the usual working hours people have. But of course, schools end at 4:30. So there is a total lack of synchronicity between the timetables that children have and families have. And if people had a job, well, they found that if they finished work at 1 and they went home for lunch, then they didn't have time to go to do whatever they needed to do in social services. And of course, we were only open from 8 to 3, but from 2 to 3 we would not be able to assist citizens. So that was really very inconvenient. But with our change in working hours, that's now a thing of the past. We offer from up to 6 o'clock in the afternoon our services. And since COVID, there's been teleworking. You know that during COVID, everyone had to work from home, but now we continue doing that one morning a week. So you can focus on more administrative tasks, and then afterwards we work in a presential manner. But I think I already told you this. But anyway, another thing we do is that we don't always work at our offices in the actual building. We often go to people's homes, and we also optimize the use of space. Of course, our services now are quite large. They've grown a lot. There's not space for everybody in the office. We have 6 offices and a large co-working space also. And the fact that people can start working in the morning at different times, and then when you work outside the office, that means that there is space for everybody. Something that works very well, because if not, it's hard to organize themselves, is that people always need a prior appointment in order to come in to talk to us, so that they can choose the time slot that fits better in the needs. And well, another thing that I was doubting about is this was best practice, I said at the beginning, was that in the rest of the council, these changes have not been made because people are used to working from 8 to 3, which may be very convenient or not, or depends. And some people, when they've heard this proposal about working from 8 to 6, they found it as a loss of rights. But we think it's a good way of being able to spend some time with our families. At lunchtime, mothers and fathers, usually mothers, because there's only a couple of fathers who do this, but a lot of the mothers can go home, have lunch with their children, and then go back to work, and that's fine. And there's also people who prefer to have a more compact timetable, and they have a shorter break for lunch, and they can leave earlier. So it's like time schedule that is tailored to each of the workers, and it also improves the quality of the service that we offer. Thank you very much, Ms. Ferrer, for showing this best practice here from the Council of Amposta. And thank you also for overcoming all the hurdles to get here this morning. Really glad that you managed to get here. So we've seen examples of best practices of use of time from different city councils, Santa Coloma, Gramenet, and also from Amposta. But what happens in the private sectors? What can be done in the companies in order to make working and the use of time easier in the private sector? And for that, we'll be listening to Mr. Ejarque Guillamat. He's from SECOT, responsible for working relation. He's going to present a project called Time Capsules. Now, what is that about? Well, good morning to all of you. Thank you for inviting me. I don't know if there'll be time for questions afterwards or what. Well, that depends on time. Okay, depends on time. So that's what happens in these sessions. Okay, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible so we have some time. I'm from SECOT, which is a business organization that has headquarters in Terrassa and also in Barcelona. This evening we have a session, a meeting here in Barcelona. We have been working on different projects for many years now around the equal opportunities and obviously also on time management, and answering the question that you asked, what the companies do. Well, as you know, there are many different types of companies, but what we do, and a bit along the lines of what our colleagues have just said, very often how much people can work has to do with time management. So I'd like to highlight the project I just mentioned, which is Time Capsules, which is an awareness-raising project that we worked on together with the Catalan government in order to improve people's awareness around the hours you spend working. We find that in our type of companies, in our group of associates, usually SMEs, a lot of self-employed workers. I'll talk more about self-employed workers later on because they're a small, very specific case. But we try to have measures that allow us to manage time in a more reasonable manner. And very often these small companies find it as very difficult, as a kind of tax sometimes even. So we try to raise awareness, and with a series of audiovisual capture small videos, we work on co-responsibility, flexible timetables, teleworking, training during working hours, better management of time. So anyway, this is a long-term project, and we try to get SMEs to get used to new ways of managing working time. And before I was talking about this with some colleagues here, we have what we call our Equality Office that brings together all these gender-based initiatives, but also other initiatives that has a more cross-cutting perspective. And we talk about gender, about work-life balance, working hours, and so on. And at our office, what we offer is training, accompanying the companies, and help them sometimes really foster their projects, and sometimes make them aware of other things they could be doing but they're not doing. Obviously, each case is very unique. You can't have one recipe for all, because you may have a small car workshop, you may have a shop or whatever. So it's very different for each of the cases, and you can't just incorporate all the same measures in all companies. In theory, maybe you could, but when you actually land on the ground, you realize you can't. Well, I know that we are going a bit short for time, so I would like to simply talk about self-employed people now. We carried out a study on how self-employed people manage time. And it is true there's a lot of diversity in SMEs. Now, if you look at self-employed workers, that is even more spectacular. You talk about time management, and they stare at you as if you were an alien, what you're talking about. So all these measures that you are proposing are not just complicated for self-employed workers to implement, but practically impossible. And I say that because when we try to launch measures for time management, very often we forget about self-employed workers, and they say, well, how can you talk about flexible working times if I have to work on weekends? So these are things that we also have to take into account, because very often they propose these measures for all companies, but they're really hard for self-employed workers to incorporate. In any case, in our group of companies, we are committed to time management measures. Of course, it has to be like that. It's something that really is of concern to us, especially because nowadays it's not just the fact that the younger generations have very clear ideas about that, but also the older generations are claiming for better use of time. And that's why from our organizations, what we're asking is to make sure that the impact is as soft as possible. We try to find ways of accompanying companies, trying to make things fit in for them also, because you can't just go across the board and apply the same thing to a 400 person company or a small company, and depends also on each of the sectors. So we are really working on how to manage the use of time. And I know that very often we have to convey different messages for the different types of companies. Okay, just ask me a question. So from the company's perspective, what would be a good solution for these SMEs and for self-employed workers so they can manage their hours well? Well, we'll ask them to call us and we'll make a tailor-made solution for them. It's not that I'm trying to avoid that question. The thing is that we can't just offer one single answer. For example, if a car workshop phones us up or a mechanical workshop, it says, well, how can you talk about teleworking? We can't telework. And then often we get reactions that are a bit that go a bit against what we offer, because they sort of get the impression that we've no idea what we're talking about. But other companies, however, saying, oh yes, if we found ways, for instance, of incorporating teleworking, and it's worked very well. So I say, that's why I said, well, call us. But it's true that obviously we're all committed to this new way of managing time, but you have to make it as tailor-made as possible. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, because I don't have one answer that will fit for all. But we do have to try to adapt to the reality of each situation. So thank you very much. That's been very clear. Good. Yes, you can clap, of course. Now, we've heard from the public administration. We also heard from the company sphere, small and medium-sized companies. And there's also another sector that's worked very much on these issues, which is the third social sector. We're going to hear from Julia Vigo, Head of Equality and Feminism at the Third Sector Board, and also Marta Campo, who works on strengthening policies at the Third Social Sector Board. Thank you very much, and thank you for the Time Newsweek and for the department for giving us the opportunity to talk a bit about the process. We're going to talk about especially the internal processes that we have in our organization, which is the Third Social Sector Board, and so it can serve as a kind of mirror for the rest of our organizations. First of all, I'll very briefly to talk about our board. I don't know if all of you know our board. It's a third level board. That means it's a platform of federations. So these are entities that bring together other entities. Right now, there are 37 federations all working in the social sphere and not-for-profit. And of these 37 associations, in turn, incorporate over 3,000 organizations in our territory. So we always have look at two levels. On the one hand, to represent the sector, the interests, the positioning, and they want to improve when it comes to creating social policies. But also, on the other hand, there's another aspect, which is strengthening our sector itself, because we'll never be able to represent our sector sufficiently if we're not a strong, powerful sector. And then we also have to look at our team itself. Our team has grown very much over the past year, and with this growth, two things have happened. On the one hand, there's one thing that was already of concern of the people who'd been in the board for quite a long time, which is the whole aspect of caring for us. And then there's also the fact that in our team we have tripled. So we had this common ground of caregiving. And why is this linked to the right to time? Because on the one hand, it looks at time from a twofold perspective. On the one hand, the time that each of us dedicate within our organization, and also the well-being itself of the organization. So taking it to the ground of time, we have to look not just on how we organize time, but also the quality of the time that we have when we are within our professional spheres. And it was with this in mind that we led an internal process which has led to an operational plan for caregiving. And we've carried out a whole series of processes, which for us is really important, that integrate this perspective of the right to time, but always take into account a caring and this feminist and intersectional perspective. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you, Julia. Thank you to all of you. It's fantastic to be here. And along the lines of what Julia's just said, we started our internal process, but of course we have to be very careful and take into account this diversity that we heard about in the company sphere, but we also have it in within our organizations. We try to offer something that can serve to all the diversity of organizations that we represent, apart from our internal processes. Our internal process started with a stock taking, first of all, as Julia says, a change of paradigm and a change of the way we approach things, the context, the way that we look at the world. But there's also an internal change. Many of us are mothers, and of course we want to have time for our families. We want to be able to spend time with our children and time for ourselves too. So at an internal level, when we decided to organize in this way and to question what we're doing, we started a whole process of reflection. We set up a committee for caregiving and a plan also. So we looked at how we convened our meetings, how we accompanied people who started working in an organization, and make things more systematic. Of course, making things more systematic means investing time, of course, but afterwards we have the fruit of that time that we invested in the future. So we had to spend some time on tidying things up a bit, because that's going to lead to everyone saving time afterwards. And we also leave time for caring within in our team. So we also spend time on caring for each other, because that means that we can be more efficient afterwards and we communicate much better with our colleagues. And we always have to bear in mind that we represent other organizations that are very diverse, and where everything we do can then hopefully be transferred to them. And then another thing that we've been doing within our plan was to take into account the prevention and reaction when we find ourselves in non-desirable situations. So we have an anti-harassment protocol, sexual harassment, and we also have a committee for that, with members of the board and also of different organizations and entities, and also people from the technical team. And what Julia was just saying, that we want to serve as a mirror. We generate space to talk about time and to get to know the federations that we represent and see how what we are doing could be useful for them, apart from for us also. And in this sense, as I said, we created the anti-harassment committee. We got our protocol. We set a commission, and we have a whole timeline of everything that's been done, and that allows us to look back, see what's worked, what hasn't worked, who's helped us, why they've helped us, and we'll be able to share that information with the organizations. And another thing that has emerged from our plan is our feminist plan, which Julia is going to talk more about now. Just a second. Okay. We seem to have a problem with the microphone. Yes, that's better. Okay, solved. All right. As Marta was saying, with our care plan, we have organized a series of processes which are and looked at the priorities for us. We have our feminist transformation plan, which at first started out as an equality plan, but then we thought, why not apply this cross-cutting feminist perspective that I mentioned at the beginning, open up our eyes and not just stay at the more formal level, but try to include the whole diversity that we have or sometimes do not have sufficiently represented within our organizations. And with our feminist transformation plan, we have 8 pillars, which I'll very briefly talk about. And so it includes the culture of organization, working in networks, representation at a horizontal vertical perspective, the payment policy, the balance between work and life, health, well-being, and also health and safety at work. And as Marta said, we also take into account violence against women within the workplace. And that allows us to work at an internal transformation level and also to serve as a mirror. And it means that there is an investment of time, but we do that fully convinced that it's going to lead to an organizational change that will be of benefit to everybody. I think we also need to go back to the logic of caring for others, because that's shown us that 2 things are essential for the transformation of the organization. On the one hand, to create a culture, and the other hand, create a structure. So we want to have both of these pillars. Not just do we want to have informal space for care, giving, have time to ask each other how we are before a meeting, before participating in a talk, but also to creating logical, formal spaces that allow us to reflect all these aspects. So some examples of the measures that we will have implemented when we have our feminist plan on way, which may have an impact on time. We, on the one hand, defining the job positions. Why is that important, taking into account time? Because it also allows us to recognize reproductive tasks where don't belong to anybody, but it always befalls the same people, so women, and we need to recognize these tasks and share them out appropriately between everybody. And then also being clear when it comes to the need for spaces for negotiation, also digital disconnection, and also the use of time. This needs to be revised periodically and fairly, and then time as an indicator of health and safety at work. How many of us have in a structural and repetitive manner had to been overburdened with different tasks and efforts? So we need to also focus on good health and safety at work. So I think that's just about it, and we'll just say a few final words. Thank you, Julia. Julia's mentioned some of the actions, and I'll just like to mention a couple more, and then we'll move on to the conclusions. One of the other things that we do, which is part of our feminist transformation plan, is our training plan. Because if we are not able to recognize these situations, we won't be able to work on them. So there's a whole empowerment and accompanying process and empathy that has to be included there amongst ourselves. So we need training at an emotional level, emotional consciousness, how to manage conflict, how to talk to others, and everything that she said about how to represent ourselves in a vertical and horizontal leadership, shared leadership. Of course, an organization has been around for a long time. We have our ways of working, and that means we also have our own doubts. We need to manage these situations, but if there is a will, I think there will be ways of finding out how to do that. And then we'll also have a digital disconnection plan, which we are working on already. And so we'll start sharing this with the organizations, with the Equality and Improvement Group, whose first meeting will be held on the 24th. Now we're running slightly late, so very, very briefly, I have 3 ideas to wind up. And they're they have to do with the twofold perspective, so an internal process, but also an outward look. That's for work, but also for caregiving, culture and structure, and time, a twofold perspective, a quantity, but also quality. Thank you. Thank you for your good time management. We actually have 3 or 4 minutes left
for questions from the floor, or maybe questions amongst you. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. Ask about any of these good practices that have been shared. There's a question here from the second row. Could we have the handheld mic so that we can hear the question? Go ahead. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you what your specific proposal is in terms of working day, the number of hours, or the hours rather. Who is the question for anyone specific? Well, everybody addressed it, Sekot, Cristina, Nuria. Well, do we have one volunteer to answer this question about working hours organization? Maybe Mr. Jarque would like to answer this question, perhaps. Yes, please put your microphone on. Well, I'm not sure whether I feel like answering the question, but whatever. Earlier on, there's something that I said, something we really believe in. Negotiation. Agreements. It's not about what I feel like or what somebody else feels like or what companies feel like. As we always like to say, companies or businesses are everybody, both the entrepreneur and the people working for the company. And as I said earlier, there's so much diversity that I can't really give you a figure. If I gave you a figure, some people would applaud and other people wouldn't. But that's not the point. The idea is to reach an agreement with some kind of common horizon. We shouldn't allow this hurdle to impede our addressing the matter, but we need to acknowledge diversity and try to figure something out. Clearly, the general trend is towards lower working hours. Since that is the trend, we all agree that that is the way we should be heading. So in that context, we need to reach agreements with all the necessary modulations and approaches. And of course, we will be there to negotiate these matters because we are amongst the players that are stakeholders that have something to say about it. Can I speak as well? Yes. I just wanted to say that taking diversity into account, that's better in terms of sound, yeah. Well, taking diversity into account, school hours should be adapted to working hours. I mean, if the children leave school at 4:30 p.m., we can't have a situation where parents are still working until 8:30. And so they have extracurricular or after-school activities on a compulsory basis, so that they have music until, say, 9 p.m. because otherwise there's no way to care for them. So yeah, I mean, we set things up with parent-teacher associations and other associations, but it's just not right for children to be finishing their own day at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. I mean, 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. is very late. If you have to do shopping, for instance, you might have some time at midday to do some shopping, but it's really a significant loss in quality of life. So I really support shortening working hours. I live in a rural area. I mean, when I was little, people went out very early to work in the fields, and then they would go home after lunch, and that was a time for rest and sharing. Now, that has changed. We're no longer getting up so early to go work in the fields. There's something else I wanted to say that I forgot to mention. We changed the hours of our cultural activities in Amposta. That works very well on weekends, but on weekdays we can't have activities at 6 or 7 p.m. because people are working. And so it would be nice to shorten working hours, but that would require everybody to make the change, including shops, including small businesses. Thank you very much. We can now bring this session to a close. We'd like to thank you all for your contributions, for sharing these good practices. Let's thank them, please, with a good round of applause. Thank you, and see you next time.